So welcome everyone to Startup Shuk. I am joined with Eyal Gura. You have a lot of titles which I'm going to read here, so I'm going to grab my phone. You're the venture investor at WebTalk, which invests in companies like Appsflyer, Taboola, Payzen, Formlabs, and a lot others. You founded Zebra Medical Vision. You also founded TheGiftsProject, Pic App, and Pic Scout, all acquired. And you're the board member at Reichman University. And you co-founded Healing October 7th, which I think we'll enjoy talking, which is very, very relevant right now, a PTSD recovery initiative with MDMA. So Eyal, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
How's the journey here? It's not long.
Very close.
Very close. Amazing. Thank you for the time to come. And I find you very interesting because the first time I met you was in Yasmin Lukat's class, and you gave very spot on advice. I don't want to compare it with the other judges, but I like your advice the best, which is just spot on to what we're doing. And obviously the company that we spoke about there was fictitious. It was for the course. But I have my own company, my own startup that I'm working on right now. And a lot of our listeners are also founders. So, they are very, very much interested to listen to conversations that we have here in Startup Shuk. So, by the way, yes, I can hear you, whatever that was. Do you mind, by the way, taking your camera or mic a bit closer, like a fist close? You can also move it and adjust it. So I want to hear about your story, your background. I've introduced you LinkedIn wise, but who is Eyal Gura from Eyal's own words?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be in this campus, attached to it, physically and emotionally in so many levels for the last 22 of 23 years. So, it's amazing to see that there is even a radio studio here with all this equipment and professionalism. It's amazing. And the campus is back then it was all like a wishful thinking. It was a thought, it was an idea of Professor Reichman, and every other building there was just a sign that here will be a building. And now you'll see that all those ideas and thoughts became reality, and in such a professional way. It's amazing. Obviously, I'm very biased.
Well, that's true. I think in general, Israel is a very quick country, developed very quickly. The Technion was there before there was Israel. A lot of other universities also followed, and development goes very quickly. Just a barren land, couple hundreds years ago, and now it's one of the greatest countries with amazing technologies, and that's why a lot of people come. I'm an international student. Obviously, that means that there's an appeal to this place in the outside world. This is a startup podcast, so I would love to talk about your journey in entrepreneurship. What led from your education, which you had in Reichman University, and how did it lead you to build your own company? What was your first venture?
And the seeds of that education were always at home. So even though our parents got separated very early on, both of them were entrepreneurs. So we always, both me and my young brother Ron, we always saw and heard those stories about counting inventory, about employees, about things that went well or didn't went well in the business. My mom used to own pharmacists shops in Haifa. So the business was always there. It was like this entity that provides for us. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's less good. So my step into entrepreneurship wasn't some kind of an act of heroism or risk-taking. It was just what we saw at home. And then during the first year in Reichman, I was just on the verge of closing my first startup that I started a year before when I was still in the military service. I was a submariner at the time, and in my last year I had enough time off because I was in an instructor mode and training mode, so I had time off. It was the first bubble period. Every other idea about something with the internet was exciting.
When was it? 2004?
2001. So back then I founded a company that was supposed to stream videos of athletes and sport players online, so scouters can find the right talent for their teams. It was like a LinkedIn for sport players, video enabled, things that look very obvious today. Back then the prohibitor was that there wasn't any broadband to even show the demos. So there was one hotel in London that had the sufficient broadband to show videos for team players.
And you were 20, 21?
23. That company went busted with the bubble. It was a profound lesson, a very humbling experience. I had to learn in the hard way all the things that you learn in corporate law around debt and around debitors and around obligations of board members and stuff like that. Just had to learn it by myself. I became the first TA for corporate law in Reichman that didn't study legal studies just because of this experience. So I could recover some of my cash needs being a TA.
You could say it's a better credential. You've done it actually in the real world. So
and then after 2 years of recovering, in the third year in Reichman University, they opened what's called the Zell Entrepreneurship Program. And back then, entrepreneurship was so much less a popular thing than today that it was very obvious that me and a few others are supposed to go to this Zell class. They didn't even have a profound election process. They just picked several crazy guys on campus that were talking about businesses and shoved us into this program. And it was an amazing experience. There were 20 of us at the time. Many profound friendships emerged till today, and many companies were created by my classmates, whether it's Formlabs by Nathan Linder and Tulip and Oded Pontash, who founded Dragonfly, and Ubimo that was sold to Google, and Eyal Toledano that was my co-founder in Zebra, and Ophir Gutelzon, and many others. So it's amazing to see how those kids became founders after all.
So it's very interesting that you said entrepreneurship, you learned that from your environment. Your parents had the store. And I would relate to that because my grandfather and my father owned a store. They sold things. And I guess that's just how I know how to live life. You got to make stuff and sell it. I never thought of joining the corporate force, even though it had crossed my mind because it does have like very good pay-life balance. But something just is very interesting about entrepreneurship, that you have your own freedom to create whatever value you want to bring to the world. And what is your opinions on how entrepreneurs are formed? Some of them, like us, are founded from environment, but there's also people who are interested to join the entrepreneurship like completely from the outside. They want to take entrepreneurship degree and they will build something. Do you think that is a promising path towards entrepreneurship?
I do think it's promising, but there are many days during an entrepreneurial journey that you really don't want to get out of bed in the morning. And during those days, the things that get you out of bed are not typically the things that you learn in school or in a book, or because you wanted to join a startup from an academic perspective or an intellectual perspective. Those are typically things that are more on the emotional side, drivers, grit, other type of assets that one have on the emotional side, whether because they had issues on their childhood that made them want to create their own reality, or whether they want to prove something to themselves or to their dad or whatever. And those things are the things that will force you out of bed during those rough days. And those are the days that count. The things that separate between the successful ventures and the less successful one, or the successful founders and the less successful one, or how do you recover from those days, and not the days that are described in the newspapers about exits or about fundraising and stuff like that.
So it's built into you, it's something from within, obsession and all of those characteristics that you can't learn in class.
Yeah.
Amazing. Talk to me about Zebra Medical. What was the history? What was its founding like, the process, and what you guys do there?
Zebra, actually, it was quite of an humbling experience in the sense that it came later, or very later on my entrepreneurial journey, but it was the first attempt to do something in the healthcare world without any prerequisite knowledge or qualification on my end. I didn't study medicine or didn't even study machine learning. Yet we created the first AI healthcare company, specifically to target radiology and to try to find findings in radiological images and potentially save people's lives. So it was a humbling experience in the sense that many of the investors that I thought already know me and trust me, I had to say no, because it was a reckless decision to give so much money to someone with zero experience in healthcare or with regulatory approvals, and to a company with zero predictability around business model or what does it really want to solve. We just had this big thesis that if we will be able to release from the state of Israel, from the Clalit HMO group, all the data, then something will be there in this pile of data, and we will be able to train algorithms to detect things better than human beings. But it was a big thesis, and we were able to reduce much of the risk by being the first startup that got access to such data in the world. Nowadays, it's relatively easy. Startups go to HMOs and hospitals all over the world. They have standard agreements. They know how to de-identify the data, how to give you the right type of data, how to clean the data, how to get royalties from the data. Back then, it was all bare land, and we had to do this agreement for the first time in the world with an HMO. This is why it took 3 years, and then to hit the wall and see that they don't know how to de-identify the data. So we had to develop the de-identification software by ourselves and then give it to a third party to test it. And then there were a lot of bureaucracies and a lot of internal issues. The Ministry of Health got involved at a certain stage that we didn't even know that they suddenly heard that a tiny startup got all the access to half of the Israeli population, and no one even asked them. So it was so they name tagged us Project Nachshon, and it was back then. The Ministry of Health was managed by a bunch of very ultra-religious people, so they tagged us around the name of the guy who ran into the Red Sea before Moses. Moses and all the people got cold feet when the sea opened, and there was a crazy guy that ran into it called Nachshon. So we were called Project Nachshon because everyone expected that we will all go to jail because we got so much data without permission. Yeah. Eventually, they saw that we are starting to impact people's lives and get regulatory approvals and peer-reviewed articles all over the world. And when the company was sold 3 years ago, it had 10 FDA clearances and 2 CPT codes to reimburse the use of those AI tools with patients, and tens or dozens of peer-reviewed articles. So it's working, and it's still working in many hospitals worldwide, including in Israel, and saving people's lives.
But hey, that's the point of entrepreneurship, right? To be a bit ahead of regulation and government who are usually very slow. Like OpenAI right now, people are just waking up. Oh shoot, what do? We got to make all these rules and regulations. But talk about how and why you drove yourself into this new field that you had no prior experience in. This concept in YC called intentional startup and organic startup. Organic is if you, the founder, have very strong fit with the idea, right? You grew up there, like Mark Zuckerberg grew up in a high school environment, university setting, and built the product for that setting. So you are your own customer. But here, in intentional realm, you build something that's just out of the blue, that you see opportunity in, and you just decide to dive in. What drove you?
I think it's some of both, because back then I was a CEO of a company that was called Pic Scout. We were doing picture scouting. We were tracking the usage of digital photography all over the web and in magazines, and reported misuses of copyrighted content to the publishers of the content and the creators. So we had a very profound experience about matching images and the ability of computers to do that. We were also one of the first to do that 10 years before. And then I was hospitalized in Mexico after a scuba diving incident. They couldn't diagnose my X-ray files, and all they did is just to try to take another one and another one. And I had to beg them to stop at one point because I wanted to be a father one day. And I was very frustrated that I know that there is an ability to match photos to each other, and my X-ray photos are just sitting still there, and we need to wait 3 days for the doctors to come from the big city just to take a look. Wow. So that was the initiation of the idea. Back then, obviously, the company wasn't in a good fit to do something in a different industry, and back then we didn't even know what is AI. We didn't even do machine learning. It was like pure computer vision algorithms at the time, with a lot of false positives and things that you cannot do in healthcare. But that was the seed of the idea. From a business perspective, it wasn't organic, but just the idea of photo matching was organic.
And are you technical founder?
No.
So how did you find the technical expertise?
So in every company I founded, I always have to partner with a technical co-founder. I got very lucky in some of those companies. And the reason they were successful is because there was a good match with a technical co-founder, a friend usually. and we complemented each other. Usually I go and do the mambo jumbo thing, talk with the hands, convince people about the dream, but someone actually need to build it.
Any advice on finding a technical co-founder? Because a lot of founders, especially young ones, I think the leverage that they don't have is they don't know enough people compared to older people, older generations who have the wealth of network, right? For younger people, how do they find a good fit? How should they vet people to work with?
Yeah, so in Israel, we have a built-in vetting mechanism, unfortunately, in our society, which is the defense forces. So many people, even though they don't directly know someone, they can very easily vet how this person is and how he was treating his teammates in the military force in the last 3 years or 5 years. In other countries, you don't have this vetting mechanism. You have few people in your college dorms and you know how they drink beer, but that's it. This is what you know. So unfortunately, we have in Israel this vetting mechanism, and once you're 25 years old and you want to start a company, you can really vet someone properly. So obviously, this relates to a certain part of the Israeli population. Unfortunately, we have parts of the Israeli population that are not participating in this game, which is a big work that many of us are doing in order to integrate more and more parts of the Israeli society into. But for me, I was lucky to have great partners.
And outside of this system that Israel have, how would you advise people to, still find the right co-founders?
So finding is one thing. You can go to events and hackathons and meetups and be very outspoken about it, that this is what you want to do in life, and just be out there. But this is just the finding part. The more important part is fit. Whether you can fit to this other founder or two founders and create something together. And this is the harder part. It's you can spend time together. You can do the ideation process together. You can work for a few months together in order to understand what trickles each one and how to treat each other and what is less comfortable to some people. But usually this is all people spend, like a few months, and then they start something. And this is where the main risk is, because the type of harshness and the type of challenges that you will face year 2 and 3 down the road are nothing that you can simulate in those first few weeks of a honeymoon period.
I agree. You got to be patient to build this fit. Talk about was this time you had X-rays in Mexico the same as the one you had about ayahuasca?
No,
There's a difference.
Many years before.
Got it. So I want to talk about your initiative that you're doing right now, which is very relevant to what we're going through in Israel. Healing October 7th. What is it about, and what do you guys do there?
So unfortunately, Israel is still in a war period. It's devastating to take part in all those Memorial Day ceremonies while the war is still there, while people are still being hostage at Gaza, and while people are still being killed. Neither myself nor my friend remember such a period where we are participating in those events while the war is still there. On the other end, we all got used that every other year, every other decade, there is something that make us very uncomfortable, to say the least, and threaten our day-to-day and lives. And up until now, we overcame those things as a society. I hope we will do the same now. It seems like the Israeli society is being pushed to its extreme. We see the best in people, but we also see the results of what happened when you go into a negligence period, when you allow extremists to control your country, and what are the results. So people really start to understand it now. It's like someone eating a little bit of bacon every day, but then they get a heart attack, and only then they understand that they need to do major changes in their lifestyle. So we are having now this near-death experience as a country, as a society, and hopefully we will learn from it. So during the second week of the war, I realized that this war will eventually end, but we will remain with the largest wave of PTSD that Israel ever faced, because other wars we had, whether it's the 6 Days War or the 19 Days Yom Kippur War, were wars without social media, without media, and people got back to their lives. There were stories about people that were hurt by the war, that still have nightmares, that can't go back to their lives, but it was very isolated, and not many people were exposed to that. Now we have hundreds of thousands of people that were exposed to very harsh videos killings. We have 100,000 people that were evacuated and are still out of their homes without predictability of coming back. We had hundreds of hostages. We still have 133 hostages. We had 1,500 people that got killed in that day and their family members. So it's very different magnitudes of numbers in terms of the trauma. And then the science says that 15 to 30% of those people will still have this trauma stuck in their head afterwards, 6 months later on, which is where we are now, and suffer from what's called PTSD, post-trauma syndrome, which is a devastating condition where your life completely are controlled by the trauma. So you have flashbacks, you have trauma, you have nightmares, families are being disassembled, businesses are being broken, relationships are being shattered. And usually it takes for the state to recognize this, that the person have it after like only several years, and then only then to start treating it with a very inefficient type of traditional psychology, medical cannabis. Sometimes they just buy them a car, like things that don't really work. My personal journey led me to get to know the field of psychedelics 2.5 years ago, and I was fascinated by it and studied the books and the research, and went to scientific events. And when the war started, I was already in a good touch with a dear friend of mine called Karen Tsarfati, which is one of the most known therapists in Israel. She was and still is the CEO of a small non-profit called MAPS Israel, which is a sub entity of a US entity that worked in the last 15 years to regulate this field of psychedelics. So I got in touch with them, and together with Karen, we founded this project called Healing October 7 with the idea to bring as quickly as possible this MDMA-based treatment for group therapy for the first time in the world, to do it as in a group therapy setting and to treat as many people as soon as possible with this format that is now scientifically proven. So a year before the world started, clinical trials phase 3 were completed with MDMA for PTSD, and it was proven that for almost 72% of the people, PTSD, in terms of the actual clinical test of PTSD, is no longer there for after 15 weeks of therapy that includes MDMA. So this is what we are working on to bring to Israel as soon as possible. We already have the first group of therapists trained for that. We have the team. We have 5 hospitals that are already partnered with us, from Beersheba in the south to Ha'emek in the north, and Sheba and Tel Hasharon and Ber Yaakov, and we will start treating hundreds of people simultaneously in a few months, which is very exciting. It's going to be the first time in the world that group therapy is being tested in psychedelic settings, and also if we will be able to prove that it's working, suddenly nations will have a format to go together out of the stage of post-trauma.
That's very profound. And we had an interesting chat before the podcast talking about psychedelics in general, which I think lack the research that is proportional to its potential. There's a lot of potential in that, not just clinically to our body, but also to national systems, like what you said. So the impact on the Israeli, health ecosystem would change. Talk a bit about that.
And so the research is already there. If you go online, you will see thousands of publications just from the last several years. So we have a peak performance now in terms of psychedelic research. It was all stopped completely 70 years ago by the Nixon administration. It was politically connected to a group of people that didn't necessarily want to go to Vietnam. They didn't want necessarily to do what the government told them to do. Back then, it was shut down completely, in the sense that even the research was shut down. So it took around 70 years for the scientific groups to recover from this dry period, and many people experimented with themselves and with others and started to publish again, initially in Europe, and now a lot of research is coming from the US. So it's now back in a big way. The research is there. Clinical trials, as I mentioned before, both MDMA for PTSD passed clinical trial phase 3, and also LSD for depression. So the FDA will, in the next 12 months, will probably approve both of those. Psilocybin, which is the material, the essence inside mushrooms, is also coming back in a big way, and there are several companies in the world, including one that I'm associated with in Israel that are going to manufacture this substance in a pharma-graded way and distribute it. So this entire field is passing through a big revolution, and together with that, there is also public awareness. So now, in the last 2 years, it was on Netflix in a great series called How to Change Your Mind, which is piggybacking on a book that was written with the same name. And now billion people are aware of psychedelics, and that it's very profound and it can really impact mental health.
I want to talk about the business and technological opportunities of psychedelics. But before that, tell a bit about your story with your experience, your encounter with psychedelics the first time.
My first encounter was 2.5 years ago in a clinical setting where I sent myself to participate in ayahuasca ceremony. Ayahuasca is one of the more profound and traditional types of psychedelics, something that was and still used in tribes for thousands of years, originated from the Amazonas. I don't think it's the right setting here for to go deep into that, but it really changed your mind. It can really change your mind and tune it, and also unleash a lot of buried emotion, heal a lot of trauma. So this is what caused me to become so much curious about this world and research it.
Talking more about the technological and startup side of things, which is this podcast, what other trends besides the world becoming more open towards it that you see with MDMA, psychedelics?
What other trends in relation to psychedelics?
Yes, which opportunities that you see being applications that rise from this?
That's a good question. In the next few years, I suspect we will see breakthroughs on the regulatory side. So many of those substances will be approved to treat certain diseases or conditions. It can be psilocybin for OCD, it can be LSD for depression, it can be MDMA for PTSD. But all those regulatory approvals will be with a strict requirement around therapy, how the therapy look like, whether it's 2 therapists or 1 therapy, whether it's 10 weeks or 2 weeks, whether you need to visit the clinic or you can consume it at home. So there will be a very strict format, and it will be very much regulated. There are certain companies now that are building ketamine clinics all over the US, where people go to like a very fancy, nice clinic to experience ketamine therapy, and then they go home after 3 hours. So we will see the real estate portion of it, because the type of setting you need is very different from a hospital or a regular psychiatric setting. So people will build those clinics. There will be apps to create scheduling and transportation, because you can't drive back and forth after a psychedelic experience. And there will be a diet requirement before that, and businesses around providing those diets. And the most important thing, I think, that is still lacking and will definitely be a big business opportunity is the integration part. So many people are exposed to, it doesn't need to be even a psychedelic experience. It can be like a very profound retreat of breath work or mindfulness, or a great book that you read when you have insights and you feel that you want to really change things in your life. And it can be a psychedelic experience where you're connected with the universe or healing your trauma. But then you go back to your regular life, and you need to go to work or manage a household or deal with relationships or the day-to-day, and then people gradually deteriorate from this experience, and after a while they feel very empty, and sometimes it leads them either to go back and try something new or to be very sad about the fact that nothing happened. And so I think that there is a big opportunity around the creation of integration tools and things that will help people implement in their lives what they just learned with themselves, with their neural networks during those experiences.
I like those very specific examples, right? We will have bus transport from the facility back home after the experience, which makes a lot of sense. We had a fun chat before about, how human development might have been influenced more than we think with psychedelics. And I'm a very technical person. I grew up studying mechanical engineering, AI, and right now I'm pursuing computer science. So talking about psychedelics is something that's very not me. And this is why I find this very interesting, because I wonder how big of an influence it actually had on human development. And I want to ask, on the logistics side of things, what does it actually do and what happens when you have this treatment done? You spoke about the PTSD being no longer there after 6 months of the experience and of the program. Is this change permanent? Is it different for every substance? What is being actually done in the program? Is it something more of brain work, mental health, and the psychedelics aided in the malleability of the mind, or there's something that's more to that?
And so we can use computer science terms to explain that. So we have in our mind our own neural networks. And as we spoke earlier, when we were kids, we're trying to build our first algorithms. Those set of laws or rules, how the world around us works. And one algorithm can be that if I bring good grades at home, my mom will be happy. Another algorithm can be that if that and that boys in school are saying something, it means that I'm a bad person. Another algorithm can be that if there is a cloudy sky, there will be rain. So we build those algorithm. It sounds very simplistic, but this is what our mind is doing in those ages of between 5 and 12, depend on the psychology theory you subscribe to. And then what's happening is that we're making two very known fouls in those algorithms development that people will be fired from big data companies if they will build those algorithms with those fouls. One big mistake is that we are creating an algorithm and we are sure that it's working, even though the algorithm was developed in so it's enough that very few mishappening will happen to you as a kid, that you will make your mind that you deserve it, or that the world is bad, or it will always happen to you, even though it happened only twice. And then you will make the other very big mistake around algorithm development is that you will wait for the third time that it will happen. It will happen for the third time, and then you will say, I see, I was right. This is how the world works. I'm always being mistreated at school, or I always need to earn my parents' love by bringing grades. So those two big mistakes, one is using lousy data sets or insufficient data sets, and then the second one is to use the same data sets to do retraining of the algorithm as if it was the validation set. Those two big mistakes are things we do all the time as kids. And then we go out to the world sure that, okay, we got it. We know how this world is working. This is me. This is the society. This is how people treat me. This is how it will always be. And those stories stuck with us. And then when you have, let's say you have two soldiers coming back home from a battle, and they lost the same group of friends in battle. One of them may have this view on the world that will dictate a trauma that it's because of him that his friend got killed. He wasn't there for them to save them, and he's a bad person. This is the story he will tell himself. This is the trauma, even though he lost the same amount and same friends like the other one. The other one might go back home with the story that he's very sad that he lost his friend, but he wants to live his life in a way that will justify this loss and make his friend proud. And he's so lucky that he survived this to tell the story and their story and to take care of their families. And it's same battle, same type of loss, two different people, two different stories. And different you do in a psychedelic treatment is you enable your brain to become plastic again. You increase what's called brain plasticity. There are many neurons in the brain that in different areas that were not talking to each other for 20 years. And now you enable them to talk to those different parts of the brain again, as if you were still a child and as if you were still interested to build new algorithms, as if you still have this child curiosity. And once the brain is flexible enough, you can introduce a new data set, a new story. And then you ease the pain of the trauma. It doesn't disappear, but you just introduce much bigger and much more diverse data set. And then you retrain the algorithm.
I like that description. It makes a lot of sense. You basically increase the rate of acceptance of the mind, how much it can take in new information and implement it in its own algorithms, and you put that machine in an environment that will give that algorithm and new data and becomes a new machine.
This is why the set and settings are very important in psychedelics. So if you do the same type of substance consumption in different setting, you will have very different results, even though it's the same person. If you are rigid about the set and setting, about the intention setting, about the trust with the therapist, about how the room even look like. So we are now actually redecorating rooms in all those 5 hospitals, so it will look like a more welcoming grandmother living room like of environment versus a hospital room. So you need to put a lot of emphasis on those things. Then the patient experience the needed trust and the needed comfort. Then they can dive in and retrain their algorithms.
We spoke about psychedelics in the perspective of computer science, and we also spoke about Zebra Medical, which does, machine learning, AI imaging. Talk about the future that we are trending towards. What do you see is going on with AI and some insight that you might see?
I think this topic is already much spoken about. When we started our journey with AI, I had to spend the first 5 years out of the 10 years of the company to go on stages and convince doctors that we're not going to take their profession. And now, 10 years down the road, no doctor profession was taken by AI. So all those fears that they had back then were too early. Many of those AI tools that were created are regulated as a decision support tool to enable doctors to make better decisions, or faster decisions, safer decisions. And at the end of the day, there is a zero-sum game in the world in terms of how many universities you have all over the world to train new doctors. Reichman University, for example, it's a good example of a university that is reinventing themselves and will hopefully start to train doctors soon, but you don't have many examples like that. And on the other hand, you have billions of people that are entering middle class worldwide, whether it's in Indonesia or other countries, and they are expecting and deserve to get medical help when they are sick because they are paying health insurance. And so gradually more and more hospitals are being built and clinics are being built, but you don't have enough doctors or nurses. So we don't see anytime soon AI taking those jobs. However, in other professions where many people are employed in fields like content creation, transcripts, translation of content to different languages, summarizing legal forms, things like that, we will see a big move towards AI. Many of those companies in those fields, even today, are reporting 15 or 20% more efficiency just by implementing AI tools in the last 12 months. So we'll see more and more AI going to those type of fields, and many people are in the need to find or reinvent themselves and find different type of jobs. But this is not new. We are experiencing this as a society every other century, but nowadays it's just faster.
I spoke with Shai David, who is the CEO of Retrain AI. They help people get new skills with this emerging technology. And I think a nice way to think about it is that we're increasing the baseline, but that ceiling of human work will also increase with it. So, of course, there's something that we need to let go of, keep on doing. Besides, there are way more exciting things that human could be doing. And do you think that this AI thing is actually making humans more human? Because we're doing less of the robot jobs and doing more of what we should be doing.
On one hand, I agree with this. On the other hand, currently, the best AI researchers and the best AI computing power is deployed by a very limited amount of big tech companies that are making their money and by getting us addicted to things like social media, consumption. So for me, you mentioned being more human. For me, if you put it on a scale, everything that is addictive makes you less human or more dependent on external things rather than yourself. So if you see how kids are spending their time today and what companies are controlling our kids' time, you understand it's a very limited number of companies, and they have the best AI talent and the resources to do it, and they deploy this talent to actually make us less human. just because we are spending all of our time watching their ads and thinking that we want to buy certain products and that we need to look like certain people and we need to like or not like certain things because other people are doing it. So those addictions are pushing us further away from ourselves. And it's done by AI, it's by brilliant algorithms that are being built by the brilliant people.
This is a completely different topic, but I think that's the reason why we have open source technology, which allows other people to build solutions to problems without the side effects of those mechanisms that big tech employs in their solutions. Like in Instagram, if I want to find people, I will still succumb to the bad addictive content that they employ to keep us on the app. And if I want to search YouTube as a tool, I want to find research, I want to find study materials, right? You will still get hooked on the side effects. So I guess the reason why we have open source technologies where people can build their own tools, which is devoid of those side effects, is that we can have better tools still using AI, still using the latest emerging technologies that don't have those things, which I think kind of mirrors what psychedelics is. It's something that is not currently heavily employed by big pharma, and yet it manages to give people results.
Yeah, it's similar in that sense. Pharma companies didn't have much incentive to enable or becoming the enablers of the psychedelic space because it's not profitable for them. It's a cheap leaf or a plant or a mushroom, and B, you cannot patent it. So you cannot push other companies away from it. You cannot control the distribution of it. Pharma companies really didn't have the incentive to be the enablers of this important field. But in terms of AI, it's quite the opposite. Like the enablement of AI is done by those big tech companies. So the fact that we can all sort our photos with AI now, it's because it's easily integrated into Google Photos, and the fact that OpenAI is out there, it's because Microsoft helped them to be what they are. And but those companies, at the end of the day, all they want to do is to get you more addicted and spend more time with their products and buy more ads and stuff like that.
Let's talk about, we have spoken about, big technologies corporations and how they employ strategies to get their things done. What about emerging entrepreneurs, people who are building something new? What strategies, what thought processes would you advise to them to have? A lot of founders that I find interesting and very successful have very strong philosophical ideas about how to live life. Like Airbnb, Brian Chesky, his work with Airbnb is not just so that he can build this amazing company people love, but also for personal development. One quote he said that I really like is that your personal development must always exceed your company's development, because you are the head of this thing, right? If you're not the person that's worth X billion dollars that is my company's worth, then you're not the person to lead that company. And basically the idea is that you don't build this so that you are someone who is worth $1 million or $1 billion, but you do it so that you become someone who would be worth $1 billion. Basically, you have those characteristics that would be worth billions of dollars. And so that's Brian, right? He really like personal development. And people like Sam Altman, OpenAI, he has his own psychological ideas philosophical ideas about how the world should be. He wants AGI. He wants that people have universal basic, not income, but compute, meaning we increase the bar of human intelligence. Everybody have their resources, and basically we level the playing field. So they are motivated by very strong ideas. Elon Musk, he wants to, conquer the universe, whatever, go to Mars, occupy Mars. So very strong ideas. What is your advice for young entrepreneurs?
It's becoming more philosophical, but personally, I don't think that measuring your personal development as the ability to be worth more and more billions, or to conquer something, or to enable people to do something, all those things are very egocentric or ego-dependent. I think it's actually contradicts personal development. So in my view, the more developed you are, the more you try to go in, and you have less need to prove that you grew faster than your company, and this is why you can create more billions, or you can conquer the moon, or things like that. We actually, if you look at it actually from the outside, you can actually see all those tech billionaires competing who go to space first. It's very similar to what you see in a daycare sand area, and how kids are beating each other up in order to achieve an external type of justification that is it's not really them, it's something external, some kind of recognition. So I'm not sure whether people will want their external or their personal development to be dependent on external things like that. It's obviously it's very personal. My recommendation to entrepreneurs is actually the same that has been in the last 20 or 30 years. It's just to try to solve a problem that they are passionate about, and just to keep doing it even though it's hard. It has nothing to do with AI or stuff like that.
Right, because those are the solutions. You want to focus on a problem.
And now there will be new problems around data sets and around AI and around the fact that there will be faster, and there will be companies that will solve those type of problems.
So how would you define success? You've compared this to different ways people validate themselves, right? One externally, being big, getting all this recognition from the world, occupy Mars, whatever. And one going inward, seeking personal development, improving oneself for oneself, and doing what you said, really looking inward and seeing what you can improve of yourself, but also the problems around you, how you can solve them. How would you define success?
So again, I think it's a personal issue, and every person needs to answer it for themselves. For me, I'm more curious toward the latter, like how to be in a state where there is no need for more things or justifications. And every action is very mindful. I know, at least for myself, that many things that I do now around company creations and making ideas reality, sometimes it takes me 1% of the time that it used to take me before. And just because I wasn't mindful enough, I did like things in a very aggressive way or from the wrong reasons. So sometimes if you do less, but you're more mindful, things are happening in a very strange, positive, smooth way, comparing to just trying to hit yourself against the wall.
I like that. There's this quote also to close this. I think we can throw a couple quotes and see what you think.
You have so many quotes.
I have a lot of quotes, but one is that when you walk, when you run. When you do something, just do it, and do it fully. Allow yourself the capacity to give all of yourself to that one task. Don't do this and do that. You lack focus. And another quote that also links to that is, a focused fool is more successful than a distracted genius. Okay, so I like that. And hey, it's been a fun talk. I would love to keep in touch. And for those who want to learn more about what you work on, where can they find you?
So nowadays I'm trying to complete the fundraising and the platform building of Healing October 7. So you can go to the website of MAPS Israel. It's MAPS-. There are various ways that people can help us to promote this project. And we need all the help we can get.
Amazing. It's been a fun conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.